If you're heading to AgriScot on the 19th of November, join us for a live episode recording with SAYFC. Starting at 9 a.m. in Seminar Room 2, I'll be joined by Katrina Gemmell and Jack Young to record an episode on what young farmers has meant for their well-being, how Katrina filled that void when it was time to move on, and maybe a few tales from those legendary young farmers' dances. Pop along to be part of the blether. That's AgriScot, 9 a.m, Seminar Room 2. Now, on with the show. Welcome to Blether Together, brought to you by Farmstrong Scotland. I'm your host, Sarah Stephen, and together we'll be travelling across Scotland to chat to farmers and crofters to learn more about them, their businesses, challenges, and the positive steps they take to manage their well-being. Our thanks go to NFU Mutual Charitable Trust for supporting the podcast series, and to our founding funders, Movember and the Royal Highland Agricultural Society of Scotland. Gerard, good evening from Scotland.
Good morning, kia ora from New Zealand.
Welcome to this Farmstrong podcast. We feel very honoured to have you with us.
It's a privilege to be here. I love the relationship that Farmstrong in New Zealand and Farmstrong in Scotland have, and we're like cousins.
Exactly. That's a nice way to put it. I mean, you were there at the beginning, Gerard. You helped design and establish the programme in New Zealand back in 2015. Does that seem like 10 years ago or just like yesterday?
A bit like yesterday, but a lot's happened during that time. It's gone quick, but we've made a lot of progress in 10 years.
It's gone quick. Well, you're coming to us from Wellington, New Zealand, I believe, and it's the start of your day. How's your day shaping up so far?
Oh, it's looking like a good day. There's a frost on the ground, which is a promise of a beautiful day. And it's obviously the season for podcasts. I've got another podcast with the Holstein Society here about Farmstrong.
You're going to need a lot of cups of tea.
Yes.
So let's crack on. So what I tend to do at the beginning of this pod is a bit of an icebreaker. I ask some rapid fire questions. Are you up for that? Are you up for answering them?
Oh, of course. Yep.
It's just whatever comes to mind first. Don't worry, we're not going to analyze it too much. I promise.
Well, actually, yeah, probably at 7 o'clock in the morning here, you probably wouldn't want to analyze whatever I respond, I think.
Okay, right. I'm just going to fire away then. The first thing that comes to mind, you just go for it. Okay, so Gerard, here we go. First thing you do in the morning.
Make a cup of tea.
If you had to excel at one sport, which sport would it be?
One day eventing.
What is one thing on your bucket list?
Spend more time with my grandson.
Do you have any bad habits?
Yes.
What occupation would you like to try other than the one that you're in now, your own?
Coaching.
Are you more likely to be early or late?
Early.
If you could go back to an age and live it again, what age would that be?
Early 20s.
How do you answer the telephone?
Kia ora.
When did you last have a good old sing-song?
Yesterday.
What's the last thing you do at night?
Put on a sleep app.
There we go. You've passed. So let's go back to the beginning of Farmstrong, and just if I say well-being to you, what does that mean?
Feeling good and functioning well.
How did Farmstrong come about?
Some organisations that were wanting to make a difference for rural communities, and those organisations found each other and decided that they should work together to do that.
How and why did they find each other?
Knowing the organisations answers that question. So there was three of them. One was the Movember Foundation that has a real strong interest in men's health and well-being, and I grow a dodgy moustache every year as part of my give back to them, for the great work that they do. And New Zealand's Mental Health Foundation. So they had quite a close working relationship, the Movember Foundation and the Mental Health Foundation. And a rural insurance company in New Zealand, it's a mutual called FMG, Farmers Mutual Group. Independently, the Mental Health Foundation and Movember were both looking together to design an initiative that was going to, make a difference for people living in rural communities. And independent from that, FMG was looking for a give back for the rural community. I ended up being in the middle of that. I had a relationship both with Movember and the Mental Health Foundation, and they asked me to sort of start to explore and design what could a solution look like. And I said to them, we need to find a partner that's embedded in rural communities that can bring the trust and credibility that we need, but can also sustain it over the long term, that really your resourcing commitment is really only going to last a couple of years. If we start something, we need to be around for a long time to really make a difference. And that's where FMG, we all met together and explored, and they were really up for it. And that was really the start of Farmstrong. And here we are, 10 years down the track. We're planning our next 5 years, and we're just in the final details of landing our financial pathway to support that. So it's fantastic.
I mean, you've led and we followed, and Farmstrong Scotland has benefited from what you created 10 years ago. Can you just tell me the sort of sense of need for something, the requirement that existed, or how bad was the situation? It's not bad's the wrong word, but how required was something within that rural environment, that rural industry?
I think the unique space that Farmstrong in New Zealand and Scotland is filling is we're taking a very different approach than the traditional approach to the topic of wellbeing and mental health. I mean, if you think of your mental health and wellbeing along a continuum, we all have ups and downs through life, and sometimes we are struggling. And a lot of the focus is on people who are struggling and to get them back just to a level of functioning. Really what the science is showing, and it makes complete sense from a farming point of view, because you don't treat your grass and your stock and your produce like that. You've actually got systems set up that you're actually going to keep them, they're going to thrive, because that's how you make your profit. That's where the sweet spot is. You're not going to wait for your sheep to be flyborn to think, oh, I probably should have done something to prevent that happening. And really, this is the approach that we've taken with Farmstrong. And there's a very solid science base that if you actually invest in your well-being, those are the things that will help you perform at your best. But they're also protective of some of the more common mental health problems like anxiety, depression, substance abuse. And as we've found out in New Zealand with the deeper dive research that we've done, they also reduce your risk of accident and injury, which is a big issue on farms. So when we started to engage with the sector, once the partners had got together and committed that we're going to design something, we had a process of engaging with the farming sector to understand the audience, to talk about what our aspiration was. There's a lot of organisations that work in agriculture and farming, and I engaged with over 30 of them. We ran a series of workshops, and for most of them, their focus was on getting help for a farmer that was really in a difficult spot. And that's really important. We need programs and services and organisations to do that. But what we said to them is, look, would you work with us if we designed an intervention that was actually going to take the practical wisdom that sits within farmers and also the science of wellbeing and elevate that to the level promoting, similar to what you do around grass growth, looking after your stock, growing the best produce? We're actually going to elevate how do you look after the most important asset in your business, which is you and the farmer and the grower and the people that work in it. And that there's, similar to your grass growth and production, there's a science behind this. And there's also a lot of practical wisdom in the sector. And that's how you guys roll. You share with each other, peer-to-peer learning around your farming practice. We just want to replicate that around the topic of human performance.
Describe the early days and the sort of reception that you received to that concept, to that sort of theory.
When we talk to a lot of people, they would say, actually, we totally get what you're on about. We've got no idea how you would do that. When we talk with farmers, they said, if you're going to talk to me about mental health and wellbeing, I'm not looking for information on that. We said, well, what are you looking for information on? Well, how to be a better farmer, how to, produce better milk, how to grow more fat on the lambs. And so that was a real insight for us, is that we needed to make this program a good for business program, because that's what farmers were looking for, information about how to be a better farmer and run a sustainable business. And then a couple of other sort of insights, because we did ask farmers around, what would your advice be to us around how should we do this? And actually they gave us, and we designed the program, based on these insights. They said, look, you don't want to be too earnest and serious about this. You want to bring a bit of humor to it. Farmers listen to other farmers. So you need to basically find farmers who are going to share what they do, around this topic, because that's how we learn. We learn off each other. You need to go where we're going, where we are. We need to be bumping up against this regularly. And you need to be using the channels and the events and the places that we go to be there. And you need to be in it for the long term. Everyone's trying to sell us something. We're suspicious around people's intentions, around. So you need to have the right partners, and you need to commit to the long term.
What we know now is obviously, and it's the impact it's having and the benefit it's having to so many people. But I'm thinking about New Zealand farmers. I've I've visited New Zealand. I've lived in New Zealand. You know, farmers they're sort of cut them in half like a stick of rock. You know, there's a certain way that farmers can be. And I'm just wondering, you know, you talked about that sort of reception and the resistance to it. If it benefits the business, then it might benefit me, and that they had that sort of balance there. But I've often thought that New Zealanders are quite pioneering. They're quite pioneering in their spirit. I don't know if it's because you are on the other side of the world, very isolated, and you just go for it. It's very much pioneering. I wondered if you could describe those initial conversations with people and how you managed to get people involved, was there pioneering elements to that as well?
Oh, no, I think so. The farming culture, and it's the same with Scotland, very goal orientated, very competitive, and actually very open to ways of achieving how do I best achieve this goal and my aspiration. And that is definitely the culture that we brought to Farmstrong as well, because it was a new challenge. And some people said, well, good luck with that. We don't think we can't see that really working. But, I think it was when we approached farmers, we found some amazing farmers that were really deep thinking about this and actually were really committed to the goals that we had. It's just that when they got together, there wasn't a culture that this was a relevant conversation for when farmers got together and spoke about all the wonderful things they talk about with farming. Once we started to find some of those people, we built, a trusted relationship with them around our aspiration and their support for that aspiration, and invited them to be part of it and to get the ball rolling. And so the ways that they spoke about it, the language they used, the analogies they used, were the ways that then got the ball rolling. And I'll give you just, one little example of a farmer who he was, over 70, so he'd had a big career in dairy. And so just the way he spoke about it, he said, look, when I grew, this is talking on what he said, when I grew up in farming was all about this. And he pointed to his bicep. And then he said, now it's all about this. And what do you think he pointed to? He pointed to his top 2 inches. That's right. And so that, in terms of just a very tight message, that's a great start of a conversation with a farmer, because basically, what's your toolbox for your top 2 inches that's going to deal with the complexity and the change over the last 20, 30 decades of the nature of their business that they're in. And so I think that stoic culture of muscling your way through it to achieve your goals, that was true, 30, 40 years ago to create a farming practice. A lot of farming pathway for farmers was they just shore lots of sheep and earn lots of money and then bought their farm.
I'm just interested in, Gerard, as you personally, what conversations did you have conversations about well-being, mental health when you were growing up as a child?
No, I grew up in that culture where basically showing any sign of emotion that you were struggling was a weakness. So even if I was to put a male lens on that, to be a man was to show no sign of inner turmoil. And actually, there is in a sense, sometimes we need that. We need that grit just to get through things. But in a complex world, it's not a good strategy, because what you do is when you're struggling, you don't want anyone to see that you're struggling, because you feel like your identity around being strong is at threat. So you hide it and you withdraw. And if you're really struggling, you withdraw. You stay at home. You don't even go out. You don't want to meet people or for anyone to pick up, what you're really struggling with. And so I think and this is why we chose, why it's called Farmstrong, is that we've really reframed what strength looks like.
Why did you feel so compelled to get involved? Why did you feel that this is something that you really wanted to be involved with?
Actually, for me, prior to being involved in Farmstrong, I was lucky enough to lead a big national mental health campaign in New Zealand that actually an iconic rugby All Black, a chap called John Kirwan, for people who follow rugby, they'll know him. He joined that campaign. So that was in the early 2000s. And I learned a heck of a lot, sort of being in a privileged position to lead that program. And I met a lot of people who had major difficulties with their mental health. That program was trying to destigmatize things like depression and anxiety and normalize a conversation. It was a groundbreaking campaign in New Zealand. But through meeting a lot of people who had really turned their lives around, they had first struggled for many years and hidden it, which was not helpful. And when they actually sought help and got help and what they learned to turn their lives around, when they talked to me about what they had learned, I was saying, we all need to learn this stuff around, how do you manage your thoughts and emotions and what you do when life is throwing curveballs at you? I mean, that's just life. That's actually how you succeed in life. And I also, just as part of my background, I spent 5 years as CEO of a state sector organisation. And I really realised in those sort of leadership roles, actually, that is the real tough stuff, in terms of either teamwork or performance, is actually how do you manage a group of people who are often struggling with the stresses and tensions that are around conflict, that's often grown around how they think about things, how they manage their own emotions, how they behave when they're around each other. Those were the things, if you got on top of those things, you would perform well as a team. But if you were struggling with those things, you could spiral down into very negative spaces that impacted on your performance.
Can you quantify, I mean, I'm asking you hopefully for some stats, if you've got them, can you quantify the impact that Farmstrong has had in New Zealand?
Yes, we're very committed to measurement, and that's one of the reasons why we're still around 10 years later. For the funders who put money into it, we're able to quantify the ROI. The two that we use in terms of farmers who've engaged with Farmstrong, we do an annual random sample monitor of 450 farmers every year. We did a benchmark study before we launched against the dashboard of wellbeing behavioural measures. So the key stat is that over the last 7 years, between 15 to 17,000 farmers every year have attributed an improvement in their well-being to their involvement in Farmstrong. And there's very strong methodology behind the random sample telephone-assisted surveys of farmers and growers that we use for that.
That's fantastic to hear. And how many farmers are there in New Zealand?
There's 50,000 farmers and growers who identify in our Stats New Zealand surveys as being a farmer and grower. But we know that, the predominant model in New Zealand farming is usually a family, husband and wife, family-based farm. So our reach is also extended into families.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more than that. But the survey methodology that we use is of 50,000 farm owners, and there's about 25,000 farm workers. 15 to 17,000 is from a potential population of 75,000.
And that's fantastic. And the impact that it's having on day to day, can you describe, anecdotally, people that sort of share stories with you and how that has improved their well-being?
Totally. I think, I'll give you some just little, just examples of what the program has prompted people to start building in some regular different habits. And they don't, I remember, and this is what farmers have told me, these are just beautiful little vignettes, farmer who was experiencing huge financial pressure during a dairy downturn. And he got into the habit when he was out shifting his fences of just stopping for 3 or 4 minutes and listening to the sound of the bellbirds. And he said for him, look, it didn't fix my financial problems, but it just reminded me what I loved about farming. It calmed me down. I was just in the moment, in the present, lifting my head up, looking around, listening carefully. And he said that just reminded me what I loved about farming, and just was a real balance to this sort of difficulty that was drawing me into a negative spiral. And that is such a fantastic, living in the moment, living in the present, stopping worrying about the past and the future. And then another farmer that learned about, about the science idea of the negativity bias, which we all have, it's a survival instinct from our evolution. A lot of people that didn't notice the things that could kill them, well, they didn't live very long, in terms of those, when there was lots of threats out there. So we've got, part of our brain is hardwired to notice negative things. And now we don't have a lot of physical threats. We take that more into the social space. So we're often looking for threats in the social environment. So this farmer, he was also in, spiraling down into a negative space, and was always, when he was driving down his drive, he was always looking at the broken fence post that he hadn't got around to fixing. And his internal conversation was, "Are you useless bastard? You just can't organise yourself to get around to doing that." That was just a trigger for a low mood. Then when he learned about the negativity bias and realised, became aware, that's what my brain's just doing what your brain does when you feel like you're under threat and stress. So now what he does is he looks at the one fence post that he has fixed when he's driving down there. It's a good job, mate. Bloody great.
It's sounding very familiar. I mean, we all have it within us. What are some of the boundaries that you set as a result of being involved in Farmstrong?
It's sort of interesting. Farmstrong's become a bit like an extended we call a whānau, a family. And I think a lot of us, we make decisions around what are the boundaries that work for us at the stage of life that we're at. I'm at a different stage in my life where it's about giving back. The future is not me. I've just put in my application for superannuation, which is a bit to get my head around. But I'm definitely about supporting the future, which is other people. So the boundaries, I'm probably looser around my boundaries these days than what I have been. In a sense, you've got to be really careful because it's very similar to one of the challenges that farmers have around setting boundaries between their own well-being and the well-being of their business, and maybe prioritising that over, and sometimes even over their relationships with their intimate partners and their families. So I think it is important to realise. But for me, I think when you've found something that gives you meaning and purpose and is your mission, I don't have the same challenges around the need to set boundaries because I get so much out of my involvement in Farmstrong and the work that I'm doing. But in saying that, I do take what I've learned from Farmstrong, and I do also apply that in my own life. So I do have a big commitment to try to keep myself as physically fit as possible so I can keep up with my 4-year-old grandson. But I mean, in a sense, the motivation for my fitness now is not to complete a marathon or do a triathlon. It's actually, can I keep myself in good enough nick that when I go down to the playground with my grandson, I can actually climb up the ladder and go down the slide with him, sort of thing. So I think, that's probably the practical approach that we've taken within Farmstrong, is that working out whatever stage of life you're at and whatever goals you're at, what are the things that you need to build into your life that will actually help you achieve those goals.
And obviously you're in a very different position. You're in a different stage than you were 10 years ago, but what have you learned about yourself through the experience and involvement in Farmstrong?
For me, actually, I think the thing that I've really learned from Farmstrong, we touched on a little bit earlier, I was hardwired for the generation that I'm in, is to have a disconnect between what was happening in my external world and how I was coping with my thoughts and emotions internally. So I've brought those things a lot more closely. Like a lot of people, still a work in progress, sort of still struggle with some of that hardwired when you're dealing with some strong emotions, how do you express those? And from some of the skill-based learning that we promote through Farmstrong, and I think sometimes, I've always heard it for teachers say, look, if you ever want to get good at something, start teaching it. So being in a position where I sort of share some of the knowledge through Farmstrong of things that I'm actually not very good at myself, it's a really good way of getting better at it yourself. So I think around how to manage sort of thoughts and emotions so that they take you into an upward spiral rather than a downward, and how those difficult situations you're dealing with, that you get through them more quickly, the discomfort of dealing with those more quickly to take you back to where you want to be without, sort of sitting with a lot of discomfort and struggling in that sort of struggling space.
Farmstrong came to Scotland and you've come over to Scotland. You've been very much involved with what's happening here as well. And you've been involved in a tour. Just tell me what impressions you got when you were over here.
And talking, and particularly, at the Highland Show and some of the workshops, very similar when we were starting Farmstrong in New Zealand, that when you start talking to people about this, you are meeting a lot of people that say, I love this stuff. This is great. And then even younger people saying, I wish that this was around when my dad was starting out in farming. So I think the appetite, particularly for people who are early adopters and who really want to get in behind and join that, the same energy is in Scotland, and I've been privileged to be over there and experience that. And I think it's really just about building that momentum and looking after people that do join, so that that's a good experience for them, and finding ways for people to be more involved, in a new program. And then I think the other really important thing is, finding the organisations that can bring both funding and open up their pro bono channels and bring their expertise to get in behind it. Because I think to scale these programs and to sustain them and to get the reach that we need, there are some things that you need money to do, to do the work, alongside a lot of the pro bono contribution that you get from people who willingly get behind it and support it.
Can you share a particularly helpful tip or hack that's been very useful to you?
In terms of just a day-to-day
Yeah. I mean, day to day, that's what it's about, isn't it? Take one day at a time.
And after 10 years, and particularly the last 3 or 4 years, I'd say that if you look at the development of the program, we've needed to spend 3 or 4 years building awareness and trust. And then really another 3 to 4 years really sort of maturing the channels by which we then took things to farmers when they were living on a day-to-day basis. And we used a lot of farmer stories and, a lot of those media and event channels that we went to. But now we built incredible awareness. We've got over 80% awareness among farmers of the program. Each year we have about 36% of our audience engage with us through 5 or more channels. Over half of them sort of over 20 times a year, through all the different multiple channels. But really the last 4 or 5 years, with building on all that trust and credibility and a trusted brand, we're stretching a lot more into the mental skills space around actually what are the skills that you can learn and develop to manage the ups and downs and the stress and pressures of farming. And I think, like with a lot of things in farming, it's a skill that you can learn, and that as long as you practice, if you can, first someone needs to teach it to you. And the best person is another farmer, to share that, or a credible program like Farmstrong. And then for you to spend some time sort of practicing it and learning it. And so that, like a little one that I've learned is called catch it, check it, change it. And often, if you combine that negativity bias that we talked about, there's a lot of thoughts that run through our head. From the science says you have about 30,000 of those a day. And we do have a bias to pay attention to the ones that are more negative, and it can take you down sort of a negative emotional spiral. So the catch it technique is actually to slow down and to actually just become aware of the actual thought that we're having, and to notice the emotion, and then to name what is the thought. And often we don't realize what is actually often behind a thought that's driving a strong emotion. And then once you've had that thought, you can put a test on it and say, well, is that thought true? Is that thought helping me achieve my goal? Is it working for me? And if the answer is no, then the catch it. So we've checked it, we've caught the thought, we've checked the thought, we've asked those questions. If the answer is no, then change the thought, replace it with something else, and it generates a different emotion. So that's a good little, sort of a skill-based thinking strategy that.
What's the one thing that you do every day? I mean, obviously you spoke about the sort of physical side of things, and you've got maybe potentially gone from running marathons now just to climb up the slide and get down it with your grandson. But what's the one thing that you do every day that sort of helps you, that you've got your bad habits, you didn't share them with us, but what are your good habits that you do every day?
Actually, in terms of, I think, a very simple habit, breathing, I'm a big on breathing now, deep breathing. And again, a farmer who shares he shares this box breathing, it's called, which is really just this counting, as if you're in a box. That's exactly it. You've got the one counting around a box. And, he learned that he was experiencing on farm. Some days everything is going wrong and you're totally overwhelmed. And that was a challenge for him, on the farm. And he had a boxing background, and he said, one thing in boxing, if you lose focus, you get immediate feedback. Someone smacks you in the head. And he said, basically, the skill that you learn in boxing to overcome that is breathing, deep breathing, because it's very hard to be stressed when you're breathing deeply. We're not biologically wired for that. So deep breathing is sending signals to your brain saying, actually, things must be all good, because I've got the ability to breathe deep. Because when we're breathing shallowly, the adrenaline's up, we're trying to run away from something or fight something. So actually, I've, just as a small habit, I build that into my day just to keep me, I think, particularly really busy days when I'm needing to be quite focused, help it really focus, or I feel like I've got too many things happening, or even if my grandson is losing the plot and we're in a public situation, the first thing I do is to do that little deep breathing thing.
Do you have time to do that? Yeah. And physically, what do you do for your well-being physically?
I get out on the bike, and walking is big for me. I'm big into my music. I'm always learning new songs and things like that. So I find that for me is just puts into a very different space. I make time every day to be learning.
If you could share one tip, one piece of advice with our listeners, who may be struggling, what would that advice be?
First, check out the 5 ways to wellbeing and start to build, each day, just build one of those into your day. So start small. I think the biggest challenge with maybe learning some new habits or doing something different, it's not often achieving the goal, it's starting. So start small. So I do that even when I've got physically out of condition. I trick my brain because obviously you're often feeling too tired to do anything. So I'll say, look, I'll just do one push-up. You'll end up doing 10. But I trick my brain. I say, look, I'm just going to do one. And it's easy. I think just start small is probably, I think, check out the 5 ways to wellbeing, which is basically, if you're building things, and it's very, solid from population research around common things for people who thrive. So, build in some connection into your day, build in some learning, really good for your brain, build in some active movement, build in the ability to just pause and take notice of the things that give you pleasure. So very similar to what that farmer was doing when he was shifting his fences. And then build in some giving into your day. Giving there's more benefit for the person who's giving than from the person who's receiving. So those are just small little habits. So look to build those into your day. Then I think if you start to start to notice, the difference and the benefit of that, I think really make a little bit more time in your day to learn about some of these mental skills that can, particularly if you're finding that maybe you're ruminating or your emotions are not as positive, or maybe they're not helping you with it, they're giving you the energy that you need to achieve your goals. Actually have a look at some of the different learnt strategies for managing thoughts and emotions that then translate into more, sort of more positive behaviors. And again, we've got really good ones, that we promote through the Farmstrong. And then I think the key thing is shop around. So our call to action in Farmstrong is find out what works for you and lock it in. And we're really just a platform of showing a variety of practical things that farmers and growers have told us that work for them. And also we, support with them with the solid science that sits behind it. But explore and try what might work for you, because we're a bit different as well. And then I think with some of those mental skills, sometimes they require a little bit more effort. But like with anything that is worth doing, that you make the effort, you get a better return once you've got that into a skill and a habit.
Have you done your breathing today yet?
I have indeed, yeah. When I do my cup of tea, that's my little routine. I mean, some people could call it a form of meditation, but for me, just focusing sort of on my breathing. I think also just, sort of, again, as I go back to the stage of life that I'm at, just being grateful that I'm upright, that I've actually woken up, that I've actually had the ability to get out of bed, make a cup of tea, focus on my breathing, being upright, and just be grateful about that. Just for me, those are the little small things that I build into, sort of start my day.
Well, that's a lovely sentiment to finish the podcast. You did say you're an early riser. You've got one cup of tea. The day is definitely calling for you to go and get it. It started with a sort of, dawn sky, and now the sun is high in the sky and the sun is setting at this end. So I think I'm going to go and listen to that sleep app, and I think you might go and make another cup of tea.
That sounds great, Sarah. Hey, look, it's been lovely chatting to you, and thanks heaps for your support for Farmstrong Scotland.
No, it's been lovely to meet you, albeit online, but enjoy your day.
I will indeed. The same to you.
We hope you enjoyed today's blether and it has provided some inspiration for your own well-being. One small step can make a big impact. Find something that works for you. To read our latest stories and news, download our resources and tools, or connect with Farmstrong Scotland, visit our website, allthews.farmstrongscotland.org.uk, or follow us on social media.